Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you are moving forward just a little bit every day and trying not to look back. Small changes are so important in recovery from addiction. Not all people recover because they hit their bottom and got dragged off to jail and they had to change. Although that does happen, and it happens to a lot of people too many. But it usually doesn't make them a bright and shiny, new, well adjusted human being. Most of the time, it's a lot of small realizations and small changes that result in a person's lasting recovery. I know for me, it was agonizingly slow. Sometimes progress was not visible, but once I made a commitment to change and decided to move forward instead of back, things started to improve, even if I couldn't see them. I just dug in myself a huge hole, and it took time to get out. There was a time right after I got on Suboxone that I was using both heroin and Suboxone pretty much at the same time, even though you're not supposed to be able to do that. I had figured out a way. I'd be using Suboxone when I couldn't find dope or if I didn't have the money for it. And there was a time when I'd use Suboxone just during the week, all week long. I'd use Suboxone, and then I'd do heroin on the weekends as some reward or something. There was a long time when I didn't really want to use heroin. I had really struggled with trying to figure out a way to cut it out of my life, but it was just so ingrained in all that I knew. I'd beat myself up when I got high, but I just really didn't have the coping skills that were necessary. I didn't know how to say no to my friends a lot of times. I didn't know how to deal with boredom. Every time my boyfriend would leave, I was like, woohoo, I'm free. I can get high, and I would get upset. Sometimes, I'd have a craving and I'd just go get high. Before I knew it, I was on the way to the dealer. I'd already called them. So it was like, I hated myself for it. A lot of time, in the beginning, my associates weren't the best. So I just was with the wrong group of people. So I'd struggle with boredom and stress. And like I said, coping skills. But I had at that point made a commitment to move forward. And even if I couldn't move forward, I was going to stand still. I just definitely was not going to move backwards. And that's what was important to me. So the times that I would get high, they became less and less and less. And, it took like a year where I reduced from down to like a day, like getting high every day. And then it was like getting high a couple times a week. And then it was like getting high a couple times a month, and just slowly and slowly and slowly. And this was like after 15 years of struggling with addictions and rehabs and prisons and things like that, where there was no motivation to change. I had to go through all that, of course, first. And then, being on drugs like methadone and Suboxone, I tried all those different ways. All those times I just, didn't know what to do to stop and didn't want to stop. But once I started wanting to stop, it still moved really slow for me. It wasn't moving fast enough. But it did. It eventually, things changed and things got better. And I went longer and longer without putting drugs into my body. And then the longer I went, the stronger I become. And the less I wanted it. And the better my life became. And just things started getting better and looking up. But it wasn't visible in front of me at that moment. It was something that was It took a long time. I couldn't see it happening. I had to look back to see it. So, now in my life, I could have a table full of drugs and just walk away. But that took years and years and years of learning skills to get to that point. I have a psychiatrist. I still see a psychiatrist. Everybody should see somebody to talk to, and he and I differ in that theory. He says that he thinks about getting high every day. And I do not agree with that. I do not want to get high. I do not relish that part of my life at all. I do not want to go back there at all. And I think it comes down to just really being a happy person. He seems to me to be the person that is just angry with his life and not happy, whereas I'm incredibly happy with where I'm at today. So I think that has a lot to do with whether or not you want to use drugs. I do know that even if I were unhappy, I might be tempted to use drugs, but I'd like to think that I've been happy for a long time now, so I don't think there's ever anything that could happen to make me as unhappy as I was when I was using drugs. So I have come to a realization that, that compounds things. So I feel like I could cope without drugs. And I think that's one of the biggest difference from when I was using to now is that I am happy, but I wasn't always happy. There was a time, like I said, where I was unhappy because I was still using, and my life was getting better, but it wasn't happening fast enough. And on those days, I really struggled to be happy. But I made a conscious attempt. I had a journal, and I really looked for ways in my life to be happy. And I would wake up every morning and I would be determined to be happy, whether or not I had anything to be happy about or not. So, I think that's important, right? That you need to have a game plan. Before, when I was using drugs are what made me happy. My life was tough, and I used drugs as a reward. It was like, oh, Friday's payday, let's go get high. It started out like that, or getting high with friends when I was in my teens. And then still, even towards the end, you would be so sick, you'd be so excited when you got up with your dealer or you got a new connect. Like, everything you had was centered around drugs. They were so tied to my reward centers. I had to literally teach myself how to be happy, and I had to figure out what made me happy, because I didn't know what made me happy. I had been doing drugs for so long. That is what made me happy, or that is what I thought made me happy. So I had to find other ways to be happy. I met somebody that knew how to be happy. That was really important. They taught me how to be happy and what I should look for in happiness. So, and how to recognize what made you happy. Like today, I like to do things like, like tomorrow I'm going to go hiking in the woods, be in nature, hanging out with friends. Exercise is a real good way to make yourself happy. I had to find ways to, create happiness in my life. I tried to learn new skills. I went back to school. I picked up an instrument. I started learning about music, finance, just things that I wanted to continue to do. I had to recognize them because before all I had done was drugs, spend time getting drugs, using drugs, selling drugs. I mean, that's what my life revolved around. So I had to rewire my brain to focus on, the beautiful things in life. I read an article recently. It's called Why Addiction Isn't a Disease, but Instead the Result of Deep Learning. And we'll dive into theory later, but for now, you guys just need to know that I personally disagree with the Minnesota model and the disease theory of addiction. I do not believe that addiction is a disease and that we are incapable of recovery and healing. I just don't, and that we are always addicted and we will always be in this perpetual state of, just on the edge of becoming an addict again. I don't agree with that. And I read this article, and it was about neuroscientist Mark Lewis, who was previously an addict and today is a neuroscientist. And his belief in the prevailing theory in the United States is that addiction is a chronic brain disease, right? It's a progressive, incurable condition that can be kept at bay only by abstinence. That's the disease model, which is also the basis of 12-step recovery and mostly what most rehab programs are ran off of. I am not taking away anything from 12-step recovery. It has helped a monumental amount of people, but I will say that I believe addiction is multifaceted, and I don't think you can nail it down into a corner like that. And I also disagree with the whole, not having a choice in the matter and having to give yourself up to a higher power. So in this article, which is in the National Drug and Alcohol Research Center database from, I believe it's an Australian article, in UNSW Sydney, Lewis argues that addiction is the result of deep learning, and that you can unlearn the habit of addiction by forging stronger synaptic pathways by creating better habits. And I personally believe that that is something that I have done in my life, and it's worked. It's worked for me, so it's worked for a lot of people. In the U.S., of course, there's a lot of vested interest and financial interest in perpetuating the disease model. The article goes on to say, eventually, what I thought was interesting, that, let me find it in my papers, that since the U.S. hasn't had access to free or subsidized health systems like other places have, a person needs to have definable illnesses in order to have treatment covered by health insurance, which is one of the reasons why addictions was classified as a chronic brain disease to begin with. And the article continues to say that people I was reading, but it goes on to say that the longer time you spend in an addictive state, the more the cues attached to your drug or drink of choice, and it's going to turn on the dopamine system, right? So at the time the dopamine is released by the drug and the dopamine system is being ramped up, there is a decreased activity in the areas of the brain responsible for judgment and decision making, right? So that's happening in your brain. And so, while the disease concept suggests that a person who has become abstinent will be in perilous remission forever, this article basically goes on to say that new habits can rewrite the old, but that people need to be ready because there has to be a powerful surge towards other goals, which I definitely believe. Like when you are trying to get clean, you should have a plan. You should have goals. And I'm a very goal driven person anyway. I like to make lists, I like to accomplish things. And so I really just, going back to school really helped me in the beginning find other things to focus on. So it says that there was a study that was made about addicts of cocaine, alcohol, and heroin, and it showed that 6 months to a year into their abstinence, there were regions of the brain that previously showed a decline in symptomatic density from underuse. So their brain quit working because it was not being used anymore, right? You use it or lose it, I guess. And so when they stopped using the drugs, it returned to baseline and then even went beyond baseline. And of course, that indicates growth of powerful, and you can grow new synapses in your brain. And if you're setting up new paths, then you're also, of course, deactivating old paths because they're being used less. So I thought that article was really good. If you get time, you could check it out. It's called Why Addiction Isn't a Disease, but Instead a Result of Deep Learning. And I mean, I definitely agree that we as addicts have created some habits that we don't really know how to change. And so taking a serious look and accounting for those, making some goals, right? You need to sit down and make some goals and try to attain those goals. So let's talk about practical ways to facilitate recovery and obtaining those goals, right? First, we should know that neural pathways comprised of neurons connected by dendrites are created in the brain based on our habits and behaviors. The number of dendrites increase with the frequency a behavior is performed. So you can picture these neural pathways as like deep grooves or roads in your brain, and your brain cell communicates with these through a process called neuron firing, right? So that's how your brain communicates with each other. As participants participate in new activities, they are training their brains to create new neural pathways. And of course, as that happens, they get stronger with repetition. So eventually, the behavior is the new normal. Of course, it takes time, right? It says it takes an estimated of 10,000 repetitions to master a skill, right? So, right, you have to do it a bunch of times. But the more you do it, the easier it is. It says that 3 to 6 months is about what it takes for a new behavior to become a habit. And one way we can do this is through visualization. I broke my hip right after I got out of prison, and I spent a lot of time visualizing the bones growing back together, and I swear it made a difference. A lot of people think I'm crazy for that, but people are beginning to come around on visualization, and I think that a really good way to do it is to sit down and visualize what your life what you want your life to look like. And you have to also feel it, right? So you have to feel what you would want your life to feel like. So if you just spend some time when you get out of bed in the morning, before you get out of bed, before you roll out of bed, just thinking about what a normal, happy, optimal life looks like for you. And then what it would look like if addiction wasn't stopping you or taking up so much of your time. You know, what would you be doing? Would you be spending time with your kids or your family? You know, do you want to start a family? Visualizing what that family would look like, what it would feel like. Visualizing yourself being happy. For me, that was really important, along with meditation, which you guys all know I'm a big proponent of. You know, I remember the first time I saw somebody shoot up before I started getting high. I remember it to this day. It is ingrained in my brain as something dramatic, and I mean, it probably caused a little bit of trauma, right? It's still there. And I have spent a lot of time trying to rewire the neural pathways in my brain. So I honestly have forgotten a lot of my old drug life, which is in a way kind of sad to me, but it is, you know, you got to take it with the breaks, right? I'm so much more happier. And if forgetting the way I used to be is what comes with that, whatever, you know? So I really just remember what that looked like. And I think for me, when I started getting clean, it was very important to me to replace those memories of trap houses and hopelessness with memories of new things, you know, sunsets, skiing down mountains, snow, spending time with the people I loved, you know, just being at the beach, all the things that I couldn't do before, just being happy with the people that I am, happy where I'm at now. That was super important. And I had to take these bad memories out of my brain and just erase them with new ones. So like now, whenever I see something beautiful, like if I'm in my garden and I see a flower blooming and I grew that, or, you know, like I see when I was recently in Belize, like I made sure that I stopped there and I spent some time, you know, just a minute, just logging that beauty and absorbing it into my mind so that it lands in my long-term memory, so that my dreams are made of these things, so that when I see stuff, hopefully one day when I die, it's not going to be a bunch of people overdosing and fighting, and it's going to be wildflowers and roses and just good memories that I've logged in there like a computer. You know, I don't want those bad memories. I don't talk about them very much. I know plenty of people that reminisce so many things when they, you know, of times past. I tend to keep it moving forward, right? Like I'm all about making new memories better than the last. And it's been proven that intense, prolonged, and repeated neural activity leads to enduring imprint through which future neurons are likely to flow. So, I mean, it's like a river that shapes the land. The more we think about it and feel a certain thing, the deeper the river channels become, and the more likely we are to think and feel the same way in the future. It's like, you know, creating a path in the forest. The first attempt down that path is very hard. and requires a lot of work. But each time you walk the path and beat down the weeds, it gets easier. And every time you come after that, it's easier and easier. It continues to get easier. And that is what's going on with our brain, right? Like, we wake up in the morning and we are instantly faced with sickness or a craving or a drive to do something. And before you know it, you're off to do the same thing you've done before and for. That's go meet the drug dealer, go get high. Then you've got to sell drugs. You've got a couple hours before that craving hits again, and that just drives everything you do in a day. And it's just like so easy to keep repeating that same behavior every day. And it's hard to create new behaviors, but that's really what you have to do to get clean and to stay clean. I have had so many of my friends have longing, lasting bouts of cleanliness and then relapse. I can't say that I have much experience with that. I did about 7 years of straight drug addiction, and then I was clean for 2 years. But during that 2-year time, like, I still wasn't clean. I would still step out a little bit, right? Anyway, I ended up relapsing after the 2 years. I mean, not like I said, I wasn't super clean to begin with. I was still getting high on the side. You can do that with MAT drugs, right? If you have methadone or Suboxone, you can regulate. But, then I went another 7 years just straight balls to the wall, getting high every day, living that lifestyle. And then, I went to prison, and then I got out of prison and continued getting high. And then I made a decision to change, and slowly after some time I changed, and here we are today. So I don't really have some experience with as much experience with as some people have with long bouts of cleanliness in which they have relapsed. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, there's nothing in this world that would make me relapse now. I'm past it. But life is long, and there are lots of things that can happen in a person's life. So, for me, it's about while I'm clean, while I'm happy, it's about building up as many tools and becoming the person that I want to be while I have this opportunity. So, and not worrying about in the future. We talked about visualization, and then another thing that I definitely think helps is exercise. I mean, we all know that dopamine plays a super important role in happiness, and the neurotransmitter in the brain that's necessary for feeling pleasures of happiness is ran by dopamine. So, as addicts, many drugs that we do dump dopamine into the brain in enormous amounts, and eventually our dopamine receptors become tapped out, and it becomes hard to get excited about things and to feel happiness in our lives. And really, we just have to be aware of that and try even harder because of that. I mean, addicts in recovery do have a hard time making dopamine. Studies have shown that. And so we do need to constantly seek out experience and situations that can help in releasing dopamine in the brain. And that's why many addicts have a hard time with risk assessment. And another way to do that, of course, is by exercise. Exercise definitely releases dopamine. Here we have the Healing Transitions, the local place around here that is our rehab, our local rehab, they have a run club that they are always promoting. I can't remember what the name of the run club is. I'll put it down in the comments section. But things like that are so important. And even if you're not like super into like running, I'm not into running, but I do like to get out into nature and explore and breathe in fresh air. And like I said, reprogram my brain with things like trees and leaves and sunsets and things like that. And I definitely am a huge proponent of nature. And then you can just walk out on trails and just get your heart rate up every now and then. So, and the last thing I will talk to you about is meditation. We all know that I'm huge into meditation. I learned how to meditate in prison, and I still do it every day. Sometimes 2 minutes a day, sometimes 15 minutes a day, sometimes 30 minutes a day. When I can get it in, I always meditate, and it is so important. Meditation has been reported to produce positive effects on psychological well-being that extend beyond the time the individual is formally meditating. So just on the moments that you're meditating, it helps you be happy, but it also helps in the rest of your life too, even when you're not even thinking about meditation. Parts of your brain associated with compassion and self-awareness grow, and it has been proven, while parts associated with stress shrink when you meditate. And there is Massachusetts General Hospital did some research showing the parts of your brain that shrink while you're meditating, and they looked at brain scans of people before and after they meditated, and their studies show that meditation can permanently rewire your brain to raise your levels of happiness, and that participants were happier in their life after they meditated, even if it was just as little as 2 minutes a day. So, I mean, the gains for that are enormous. And for me, I had what amounted to levels of breakthroughs while I meditated. I was able to work through grief, and it definitely lowered my anxiety levels. And sometimes, when my body was sick from withdrawals, all you can think about is being sick. It just helped the moments go by easier. The time, it's a great way to pass time. Like I said, I meditated a lot in prison. I don't think I could have got through jail without it, honestly. It was so loud in there, and crazy. But, I do it every day because I know the benefits of it. And if you're not meditating right now, find a mantra, or just sit down and concentrate on your breath and try to add meditation into your day. And, don't be hard on yourself. If you meditate Monday and you plan to meditate every day, but you only meditate Monday and you only get around to it on Wednesday again, and then here comes Monday again and you don't meditate and it's been a whole week, it's okay. Meditate when you can. Just start adding these small changes into your life, and I promise you'll see results. Small steps will improve your life drastically, even if you can't see them. So I definitely believe we are all capable of change, and I promise it is possible. So until next time, keep fighting, keep searching, and keep changing. Thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.